Welcome to the 2024-25 Budget Explainer meeting. Very glad to have all of you here. We may have other people joining us, and we are recording this so that you can watch it again if you didn't get enough, or if other folks want to watch it later if they haven't had a chance to join us tonight. We are going to be doing this session in person also after the service on Sunday. Is that June 2nd? Yes. So some people prefer to do these things in person. We're going to start with a presentation by Sue Reddick and Larry Sherwood. Sue is our treasurer. She's done just a great job for us, and we've been so happy to have her on the board. Really has dug in, and yet she's not an expert, and she's not an expert in finances. And so she has all the permission in the world to say, I don't know. If she doesn't know something, she can just say, I don't know. And if maybe somebody on the call will know, and if not, we will endeavor to find out. So we will do the best we can, and we're all going to be just incredibly human like we always are. So I will just say that this budget came about through our process. We had this, the Finance Committee sets a goal for the pledge drive based on their understanding of what kind of the trends and membership and what they feel like we might be able to stretch to accommodate. They set an optimistic goal, which was a 5% above what we had received in pledges last year. And at a time when we were told by the UUA, the Unitarian Universalist Association, to expect during an interim, during a ministerial transition, that you can expect, when a minister leaves, you can expect there to be a 10% drop in pledges. And so they were suggesting a 5% increase, and we thought that was ambitious. But we had fabulous pledge drive. We had such a great leader. Jean Cannella and Wendy Highsmith did a fabulous job, and they set such a fun theme. Everybody really rose to it, and we exceeded our goal. So thanks to them, thanks to all of you for really rising to the moment and really committing and investing in our congregation. I feel how strong our congregation is, and I'm really loving that right now. So we took that pledge, the pledges that came in, and then it was the job of the budget team to begin to wrestle with those numbers, because even though our pledge drive did fabulous, I kind of want to say that, remind people that we have been in a hole, that COVID and our construction and some rising costs have put us a bit in a hole. And as every congregation in the country pretty much is, we are not alone in this. So I want to just remind people that instead of us being like, wait, we made our pledge goal and hooray, everything is fine now and there's no problems. Instead, it's more like we were in the hole. We had a 5-rung ladder to get out of the hole, and then the hole got deeper because Lydia left. And as you'll hear more in this presentation, our personnel costs got a lot higher because of some shifts in the salary guidelines, and suddenly the hole was deeper. What the pledge drive meant, getting to our pledge drive goal, meant is we made the next rung on the ladder. So we are still on plan to get out of the hole, which is really important. And it's a huge accomplishment, and we deserve to feel really proud of it. And we shouldn't confuse that with meaning we have all the money in the world and we don't need to worry, because unfortunately that isn't true. So we still have to be mindful about our plan and keep to it. So with that, the budget team worked on that, and even after the budget team was done, there was lots and lots of polishing, and some mistakes were found, and there was lots of gnashing of teeth and sleepless nights that a few of us had. And then just last week, the board at their meeting on Thursday approved this budget. I feel like this budget has been polished so much it shines. I'm very happy with where we got to. It represents a lot of work, and I'm very, very grateful to Larry from the Finance and Personnel Committee, Sue for her fine work on this, and everybody who's in the Finance Committee and all those folks in the Personnel Committee who've been behind the scenes working on this too. So with no further delay, I want to ask Sue and Larry to take over now, and they have this slideshow they'll be leading us through. If you have questions, you can use your reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that, it'll say, I believe it's the reactions one. Is that where it is? How do you say raise hand? Well, just you can, yeah, hit the reactions thing, and there's a sign for raising your hand. You'll see that on my screen, it has a little hand raised, and I will be watching for that. If I miss you, feel free to send me a text or something, or in the chat. I'll have the chat open. So, but we will try to save a lot of the questions for the end if you could. But if you need something clarified before you can move on, feel free to interrupt if we have to. Okay. All right. So I will ask, is it Sue? Are you going to take over next?
Yes, I am. And Larry's running the slides here, so he'll move them and I will, okay. So what we're doing here tonight is presenting a balanced operating budget for the upcoming fiscal year 2024-2025. I learned a lot about putting together budgets in this exercise this year. And if Larry, we can have the next slide. One of the things that I learned is that one very important input for the budget for the upcoming fiscal year is how we did in the current fiscal year, or how we think we will do in the current fiscal year. We're not there yet. And I am a little bit behind the 8 ball in getting April's reports done, but our reports are kind of 1 month after the fact. So we really don't know exactly what this year is going to turn out to be. But Larry and I both did some forecasts, and interestingly enough, gratefully enough, and from my perspective, we came up with pretty much the same numbers. And if you look at this chart here, it illustrates the forecast for the upcoming year. There are 2 colors here. The legend shows us that the blue represents what we expected in our budget for this current fiscal year. And the orange represents the results of our forecast. So you'll see, if we look at the first 2 bars, that we anticipate earning more money than we thought we would. Specifically, the donations that we collect in Sunday services has exceeded expectations by about $18,000. We thought perhaps that we would get $1,500 in building rentals for the 2023-24 year, and we are approaching $10,000. So that's another $8,500 we didn't think we would have. The auction, and congratulations to the people that run the auction, raised $3,000 more than we had anticipated. Another source of income that we can mention in this context is asset appreciation. We have quite a bit of money invested in Fidelity, and the stock market has been very good to us. I realize that these are unrealized gains, but they are unrealized gains of $19,000. So we have raised in income close to $50,000 more than we expected we would raise. If we look at the second 2 charts, we're looking at expenses. And that shows that we didn't spend as much money or we won't be spending as much money this current fiscal year as we thought we would. The retirement of Reverend Lydia has left us with some unspent money in minister's salary, benefits, professional expenses to the tune of about $6,000. We've spent about $5,000 less, or will have spent $5,000 less in our music program, $7,000 in our RE program, and $2,000 less in facilities. So this amounts to a reduction in expenses of about $20,000. And in the last two bars, we see that this makes a big difference to us. We are not going to have a net deficit in our operating budget for this current fiscal year. We will actually have a positive net revenue. So that's good. I'm excited about this. Larry, the next slide, please. And this just graphically represents what Janet talked about. It talked about the fact that if you look at the far right side of this graph, you see that dip in red, and that's what the UUA expected us to raise in pledges for the upcoming fiscal year. The gold line represents our goal, and there's a little light blue line above that gold line which said we exceeded our goal. So it was a good year. Now I'll turn it over to Larry.
Great, thank you. So I am going to talk about the long-term budget trends and the personnel budget issues. So first of all, just to remind us that we have been looking at deficits, and a big part of the long term is figuring out how to manage the deficits that we're looking at. And just to remind us why we're in a deficit situation, during the COVID period, the pledges went down modestly, but they were going down and not growing like they historically have. And we were told to expect that when we moved into the building, we would have a bump in members and pledges. But because that happened in the COVID time, it didn't happen in terms of the bump. And in the longer term, there will be an impact of the building loan that will begin in the 26-27 fiscal year, which is the year when we need to refinance our loan for the building. And we want to pay fair wages to our employees. So that's the issue. For last year, what we said was that we wanted to achieve a balanced budget in 5 years by the 27-28 fiscal years. We wanted to pay our staff the UUA guideline salaries by that same year, and that we would have deficits, and we would fund the deficits up to $150,000 from the legacy fund, and we would reevaluate this plan each year. So this year we have some new factors to look at. One is the minister transition, and for the minister transition, we have offered and needed to offer to pay at the UUA guidelines salary to attract good candidates. But if our other staff are below the guideline, this creates an inequity that we don't want. And we had the warning that's already been mentioned that we could expect pledges to go down during the transition period. Another factor is that our insurance, which is primarily our building property insurance, has increased 44% compared to what was in last year's budget. It actually was higher than the budget in the last year, but that's a really big increase, and I'm sure that you all have been noticing issues with insurance increasing a lot. So now I'm going to talk about personnel, and this is very important because personnel is by far the largest part of our overall budget. So including salaries, benefits, and professional expenses, it's about 2/3 of our overall budget. And our goal is to pay fair wages and benefits. And the UUA has developed wage and benefit guidelines, recommendations of what they think are fair wages, and we're using those guidelines. So in the UUA guidelines, they have a minimum and a maximum salary. And so these bars here show the minimum and the maximum for our current staff at the current or at the proposed number of hours. So what this means is if you look at the bar for 2022 to 2023, if we paid all of the non-ministerial staff at the minimum of the UUA guideline, it would be about $160,000. And if we paid at the maximum, it would be about $210,000. And the UUA has a recommendation for as people have longer tenure, they move from the minimum closer to the maximum of the guideline. So these bars show what the UUA guideline has been and what I'm projecting it will be for the next several years. And our big issue has been that the UUA guideline for us has increased by 37% over the last 2 years. And this happened that there really are 3 components of that increase. The first is just inflation, which obviously has been a lot less than 37%. The second is that a year ago, the UUA completely changed the way that they looked at salary guidelines, and they changed from having a system where there was a recommended salary for office administrator, a music director, each position like that, and they changed to a system where they recommend salaries based on the responsibility of the different positions. And at the same time, they also worked to make sure that all the positions had living wages, which meant that the lower paid positions tended to increase more than the higher. So that was a big deal last year. And then this year, the UUA has different regions that have different comparative salaries in those regions. And we this year moved from one region to the next, reflecting the higher cost of living and higher wages in this area. So those different factors have made a really big increase in the guideline salaries over the last couple years. So this chart has those same bars on it that show the minimum and the maximum. The green spot shows where we should be based on the tenure of our different employees in that minimum to maximum guideline. And then the red shows the initial proposal that we had put together for long-term salaries. And in this, you can see that in 2022, 2023, we were getting close to the UUA guideline where we wanted to be, but because the salary guidelines have gone up so much, we were at the minimum last year and initially were forecast to be at the minimum or a little below in the current budget year, and then stay at the minimum, and then in the future that's off this chart, then get the salaries more up to the green bar where they should be. So I met with the staff, and this proposal was not received well, and it was not received well partly because it was going to be a really long time before the salaries got to the UUA guideline, and at the same time, we were offering the interim minister a salary that was at the UUA guideline for that position. So that seemed not fair. So what we decided to do in a number of conversations was that we would work to increase the rate of the salaries, but at the same time, we would decrease the time of some of our employees. And so the proposal, and this shows what the new proposal is. So the orange circles are the new budget proposal this year, next year, and the year after. The dotted line shows how they increase. And basically, in 3 years, we do get the salaries up to the guideline amount. And this is in like based on the number of hours that each person would work. So in terms of the time, what this proposal has is that we would increase the salaries 10% per year until we reach the UUA guideline. We would cut the music director, and we would Tad currently works 11 months a year, and so we would cut his time to 10.5 months a year. And then for Carol, we would cut her time by 4 hours a week. And for the School of the Spirit director, we would increase that time by 9%. You may recall that we did make a really big cut in the time for that position last year. And the School of the Spirit Council had recommended increasing that time significantly. We didn't increase it as much as recommended, but we did increase it a little bit.
If I could, I'd like to just interject something here. One of the reasons for kind of turning this on its head and looking at trying to meet the rate as quickly as possible and reduce hours if needed is that for many years, as we've been chasing this goal of paying our staff a recommended rate, and the congregation has committed to it again and again, we've been asking our staff to just be patient with us, to hold in there, to hang on, that we were doing our best, we were trying to get there, but we were essentially asking them to absorb that difference between our goal and where we were. And by doing this, we are freeing them of some time to do something else, maybe earn more money in something or have the time to themselves. And then we are absorbing, the congregation is absorbing the impact of having less of their time. And it will be uncomfortable, but it will be putting the onus on us rather than always putting the onus on the employee. And that's kind of the shift that we were making here.
So then on the benefit side of the equation, we are proposing to add life insurance this year. It's a pretty small cost to do, and it's one of the UUA recommended benefits that we have not done. So we're proposing to add that. And then for the overall benefits, here's what the plan is. So the green check mark means that we meet the UUA guideline. The yellow check mark means that we're offering a benefit, but it's not the same as the UUA guidelines. So for health insurance, we don't offer the UUA health insurance plan. We do offer a plan that allows our staff to get health insurance on the Colorado Health Exchange, and there's sort of a number of complicated benefits there, but all of our existing staff prefer the system that we have now. And for the ministers, it definitely is that they're not used to that, but we've decided that that's the way we're going to go in the long term. And then the Colorado Family Leave, which is a required benefit in Colorado, is not in the UUA plan. So that, I mean, recommendations. So that is an additional benefit that we have. And then we're proposing to offer dental insurance, but not make any contribution to dental insurance. And then on the sabbatical and study leave, we're proposing to offer it for the minister, not for the other staff, but the HR committee has been delegated with studying that issue and may come up with a different recommendation in the future. And on professional expenses, we, for the other staff, are offering professional expenses, but they're not at the level that the UUA recommends. So in terms of our 5-year projections, there are a number of changes that are coming that are going to impact the 5-year projections. One is that one of the ways that we're balancing the budget this year is that we have funds for School of the Spirit and music. And we've had a number of discussions throughout the year, and we are going to close down those funds. And in the short term, there will be some money that will come to support the core budget from those funds, but in the long term, that will need to all come from the operating budget. The minister search and transition, there are expenses involved in that. As I mentioned before, the building loan will need to be in our operating budget, not the current year, but in the future. And on the good side is that when we do have a new settled minister, we would expect an increase in membership and pledges. That's a ways off, like 3-4 years in the future. But in the long-term plans, we did assume that. So this is what the plan looks like. The blue is what's already happened. So, this shows we had a really big deficit last year. And the orange is what we projected a year ago. So we projected a big deficit for the current fiscal year and then smaller surpluses and deficits in the future. The current, and then the gray is the current projection, and this shows the surplus in the current year, 23-24, a small surplus, so basically a balanced budget for 24-25, and then a couple years of pretty big deficits, and then that turns around and we end up with a surplus in 28-29, so 1 year later than what we had said last year. And the year later is basically because in the 27-28 fiscal year is when we would expect to start to get the bump in pledges from a new settled minister. So this, we had said that we wanted to have 150,000 from the legacy fund for the deficits. This forecast now has a higher amount needed, 162,000. And so from my perspective, that's an issue that we need to work on. But since we have a surplus in the current fiscal year and we're forecasting or presenting a balanced budget for next year, we have some time to think about the long term and figure out what we want to do to reduce that deficit. And now I'll turn it back to Sue.
Okay, just let me finish a note here. I think Larry just gave me a job to do. Okay, so the budget for this upcoming year, I feel very good about this budget. I too was experiencing a lot of angst because we had raised so much money in the pledge drive, and yet, you know, there was still so much money that we have in expenses in 24, 25. But at any rate, bottom line here is kind of in the middle along the income line. We will have $83,000 more in income this coming year than we had the last year. Now, our projections for the income that we will get next year are based on those forecasts we looked at earlier, plus some modest growth. The biggest increases, of course, are in income we're receiving from pledges next year because of the over-the-top successful pledge drive. We anticipate that the increase in the monies we received in plate collections will continue next year. We think the auction will earn at least as much money next year as it did this. And we think the same about the rentals, that we will earn at least as much money from rentals in the upcoming year as we did this year. Larry, can you turn the page? It was kind of hard for me to, Larry said, summarize, you know, our expenses. Well, that got a little bit, I didn't quite know how to do that. I had the same kind of trouble with that I had for a while with summarizing what happened in a particular month in the treasurer's report. But there are three things that stand out to me when we're looking at non-personnel expenses. Now, non-personnel expenses, of course, are those expenses that have nothing to do with our staff. So it doesn't include anything related to salary, not benefits, not health benefits, not professional expenses. And we were able with this budget to continue to finance our music program. This was important to all of us, I believe, because music is such a part of who we are and what we do at the congregation, and so much a part of our services. One of Lydia's objectives, I think, for the upcoming year was to rebuild the Lifespan Faith Formation program in the fellowship. I think that the Lifespan Faith Formation Council has taken this to heart. They have big plans for the 24-25 year, and this budget supports that rebuilding effort. And we have to pay our bills. And oh my gosh, there are a lot of bills. So we're talking here, we in the fellowship categorize our expenses. So, you know, one category is RE, one category is worship and music. Another category is facilities, which includes what it takes to keep the building in good shape and to keep the building functioning. And another category is what we call administration. And this is everything that happens in our office, pretty much. It includes the fees we pay to banks, for background checks, for telephone, internet, website, all those good things. And this budget does indeed enable us to pay our bills. So when it was all said and done, I breathed a sigh of relief. Larry? So this is the total, the look at the total. We had budgeted for these non-personnel type expenses for the 2023-24 fiscal year, $197,000. When Larry and I each did our forecasts, we figure that what we'll actually spend in 23-24 is roughly $186,000. And we're only increasing this non-personnel budget by $3,000 in the fiscal year 24-25. So the next slide is a little bit about how we got to this balanced budget. And some of these Larry has already talked about a bit. One of the things that we thought we might encourage as a budget committee, and I suspect as a board,
Yes.
is that maybe we need to think about other fundraisers other than just the pledge drive and the auction. I've heard people talk about the Great Chili Cook-Offs we used to have, and I recall some of the other things that we did in the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Fairfax, Virginia. So we thought maybe we could instigate a little bit of other fundraising, and we thought positively that those fundraising efforts might raise $5,000. Larry mentioned that we have funds for various things. I have come to understand, and I hope this is a correct understanding, I'm still really kind of a newbie at this. I tend to think about these funds as money that we save, money that we've put aside, money that we have designated in one way or another for specific purposes. We have two funds, an SOS fund and a Brinkman Pasquet Music Fund. The expenses, of course, in these two funds or buckets were meant to support various activities in the SOS world and the music world. And one of the things we did with this year's budget is we said we're going to spend those down. So we are spending them down. So all of the Lifespan Faith Formation, all of the money that they requested that they would like to spend this year to rebuild that program is coming from the SOS fund and not income. And the money that we are going to spend on expenses for the music concert series is coming entirely, or almost entirely rather, from the music fund. Because we were able to use those funds, it helped us balance the budget. Is this, Larry, where we ask for questions?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. Doug, go ahead.
I looked at the budget spreadsheet and I noticed that the total column is not the sum of the core column and the funds column. I wondered if you could explain that.
Mm,
You want me to give you numbers that I'm looking at?
yes, which ones?
For the grand total expenses on line 138, the total column says roughly 717,000. But the core column of 629 and the funds column of 112, 113 would add up to more than that.
Okay. That is something I'll have to take a look at. I do not know that I can correct it at
Oh,
this
okay.
time. But I will certainly take a look at it.
And I had a totally different kind of question. I was interested that you're reducing Carol's hours by 4 hours a week. I always had the impression that she was an awfully busy person, and I just wondered how that will work out for her.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think that it will, Carol is thrilled with that. But it does mean that there will be, the personnel committee will be working with her to identify, look at her job description and identify some things that will either have to be done by volunteers or won't be done. And we are not expecting her to do the same amount of work in less hours. But Carol is very happy to have less hours. She was super happy about this. So
Good. No, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
She actually asked for less, even less than we put in the budget, but we were concerned
about
it.
that. So we kind of split the difference a little bit, like,
So,
but it is going to be tough. And this is part of what I meant by saying we, the congregation, are going to have to absorb the pain of not being able to afford as much of her time as we would wish we could.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Okay.
I have
Cindy,
a couple questions.
Go ahead.
go ahead.
So 2 questions. One is, I'm gonna say them both, so I don't forget. How many non-ministerial staff do we have sharing that budget? And who are they? And then the second one is, I would like to understand, I don't think I know much about lifespan faith formation and what exactly that does.
So lifespan faith formation is the religious education program.
Okay, so it's all of that is involved with the School of the Spirit.
Yes.
Yes, the reason that it's called lifespan faith formation is that it also includes adult education items in addition to the youth education. But most of the budget is related to youth. And then
What's an example of an adult education? What do we do that's included in that?
I mean, the budget items are very small, but we do have some adult education courses that we do that sometimes have some expenses associated with them. And the covenant groups fall in that category.
That
But-
is an area.
And
the
I would
adult-
say both of those have very small budget amounts, but they are in that category.
When when Jessica worked as director of lifespan faith formation, her job description included staffing some of that adult RE offerings. And when we decided that we couldn't afford to fund that position at a full time anymore, and we brought it back to 25 hours, we renamed that position to be director of children and youth programs, took out the adult RE responsibilities. And the Lifespan Faith Formation Council is now working with volunteers to try to build that up. I know that Paul Brinteson is offering another course again on humanism, UU
Yeah.
and humanism, and I'm not sure of what other courses are being offered.
And
Okay.
I forgot what your other
My other
question.
question was, how many are how many are
Oh.
being paid for the non-ministerial budget? How much,
Okay.
how big is that staff?
Right, so we have what I would say are the three director positions, which is Tad as music director, Carol as the office administrator, and Kitty as the School of the Spirit director.
Mhm.
And then we have two part-time positions. One is Sue Hankins in
Mhm.
the office
Right.
and Deborah Mensch on AV. And then we have three even smaller part-time positions of people who work in the School of the Spirit.
On Sunday mornings primarily.
Yeah.
And where is the budget for, where does it come out of for like our cleaners that we pay for and whatever else we get help with for our facility?
Yeah, so the cleaner is a contract person, not an employee. So
Right.
there is a
The budget line item that's.
there is a budget line item in the facilities budget for that position. But we have had it at times as an employee, but at the current time, it's a contract position.
Thank you.
Other questions? Anyone else? Well, we are just coming up on close to an hour. And so if there are no other questions, I want to just thank everybody. We will get back to you, Doug, about figuring out what that mathematical error is, and we may need to do a little song and dance about that. Hope it's nothing too significant, but thank you for your accounting eagle eye. We really count on people like you on the finance committee being our backstop. That's really good.
Glad to help.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you all. And if you do have any further questions, you can feel free to email or call or hit one of us up on Sunday morning. All right.
Thanks for all the good work, everybody.